everyone. My name is Brooke Bendix, the founder and owner of Therapyology, and we have a very special Therapyology Thursday today because we have the whole team here recording. So today we are going to talk about coping skills, and we started Therapyology Thursdays as a way to provide psychoeducation to all of you, and we're really excited today because this is our chance to chat a little bit about the coping skills that we use in practice and also what we use personally as well. So we're going to go around and do some introductions. I introduced myself, and we're going to start with Lexi.
Hello, hi, I'm Lexi. As Brooke said, we're all therapists here at the practice, and I'm really excited to talk about coping skills today.
Hi, I'm Bella. Also excited to talk coping skills. I think they're so important and something that we all can always use more of.
Hi, my name is Leah. I am also excited to talk coping skills. I think there is a lot of misconceptions around coping skills and really what they're utilized for. So I'm kind of excited to be able to kind of debunk some things, explain some things, and yeah.
And I'm Olivia. I'm the intern here at Therapyology, and so I'm excited to talk about coping skills too, just because we all utilize them. So I think it's important to talk about our favorite ones and ones that we use on a regular basis.
Cool. So we're talking about coping skills. What is a coping skill? So as therapists, we talk about coping skills regularly in our practice with our clients, and it's one thing that is discussed constantly, and we want to define what exactly is a coping skill. Who wants to take it?
I think a coping skill is just a tool we use when something isn't working for us. When something isn't working or going right in our lives and we need to do something, that's when we use a skill.
And I think it goes hand in hand with acceptance too. So like if there's something that I can't change, then obviously I need to do something in my control about it, which is coping with it. So using some sort of tool to reduce my anxiety about whatever's going on or reduce the stress feeling that I'm having.
Totally. That makes me think over the weekend, I actually was driving on a bridge home from where I was going, and I was feeling really nervous about it, and I was like, I have to get home and I have to go on this bridge, but like I'm really anxious about it, and I just was nervous, and I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on my breath, which is a coping skill, breathing, which we'll get into later. And it really helped me literally cross the bridge because I wasn't thinking about like all the other cars and the traffic and everything going on.
Mm-hmm. I think looking at coping skills too, it's a great way to get back to your baseline. Mm-hmm. You know, so when you're breathing really fast and you're really kind of in that fight or flight, right? It's a way to kind of get back to baseline and be able to think through things realistically and rationally. You know, a lot of times we talk about how we think through things in our sessions, but how do we get to that point to where we can actually do the thinking?
Mm-hmm. If you break it down, a skill is something that you learn, and the word to cope means to actually be able to deal with something in your life that is causing stress. So when we put that together, ultimately we're providing a tool, something that you learn in a way to actually cope with stress or something that is causing you distress in your world.
Mm-hmm.
So like why do you guys think that learning a coping skill is necessary or important?
I think it's necessary because distress is inevitable. We're all going to go through things that we feel like we can't handle or don't know how to handle. And so learning things that can get us through and tolerate that distress, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm. I think piggybacking off of that, too, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to deal with that we can't just get rid of. Mm-hmm. You know, and we say all the time, like, the only way out is through sometimes. So being able really to get through.
And a lot of things out of, like, your control, too.
Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, what am I supposed to do? The coping skills are a really good thing to lean on when you just feel helpless.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah.
Like a crutch to fall back on, kind of.
Right. Like you're just putting something into action.
Yeah. And so what kind of, like, maybe would happen if I don't use a coping skill? Like, what happens to those distressing emotions?
I feel like you're just kind of an anxious mess.
I think coping skills are something that you learn hopefully at an early stage in life that helps set you up for the ability to deal with life stressors over time. And it should be something that is taught in schools as a kid, a child growing up, but then also just as much as it is important to learn about health and daily, health, like brushing your teeth and taking care of your body and, getting some exercise, is learning how to cope with life and how things can stress you out is so important, just as it is taking care of yourself in a physical way.
I like to think of coping skills kind of like as muscles that we need to build up over time.
Yeah.
Totally. Because even if you're in a situation where you're not feeling stressed or anxious or whatever it might be, it's important to practice them. So when those moments come up, you kind of just pull it out of your back pocket and lean on it.
I think when we're struggling with mental health, we often feel really stuck. And I feel like coping skills are great to be able to get us out of that stuck feeling, right? It may not solve everything, but it kind of gets the ball rolling, so you don't feel so stuck in where you are.
Well, and I think going back to practicing too, it's important to practice the coping skill before you're feeling those feelings, just because it can be kind of intense. Like if you're already feeling like that distressing emotion, so being really anxious and your heart rate is high, to kind of sit and do a breathing exercise for the first time is not going to go well, because you're going to be stressed out about it not working, or you're going to be stressed out about it not like feeling awkward or anything.
Or just you put a lot of pressure on that one time in the one moment, and then that leads you onto another path of not coping.
Yeah. Almost being like anxious about the coping skill, and then having that high amount of pressure to do it right, and then if it doesn't work, what happens? Like that really cycle.
So I think it's so important to debunk what coping skills are, because they're so overgeneralized and they're thrown around just in the same sense that mindfulness is and meditation, and those are important tools that if we learn how to do them appropriately, they can be almost life-saving in a time where you're feeling extreme anxiety and panic.
Yeah. Whenever I talk about coping skills with, clients and families, I always share that they're tools to help you get through, but they're not tools to help get rid of a problem or a struggle. I think going off of the whole debunking thing, I think people expect coping skills to just completely get rid of whatever anxiety, depression it is that you are struggling with. And, again, it's not getting rid of whatever you're struggling with. It's working through what you're struggling with.
And like reduce a feeling, not get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because my breathing still might feel really intense while I'm doing the deep breathing, but it is reducing the overall like anxiousness I'm having.
Yeah.
Kind of along these lines, I think sometimes coping skills work when things don't get worse. So even if things don't necessarily improve, as long as they're kind of maintaining, they might be working if things just are not getting exacerbated or getting worse and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes doing coping skills can feel like really embarrassing, and especially ones like that take some of that mindfulness or concentration, like deep breathing can sometimes feel silly. How do you recommend to overcome that, or how do you encourage people to either try it or what to do if it doesn't work? What do we do in those situations?
So there's so many different coping skills to pick from, and breathing might not be, breathing is for everyone, but like deep breathing and mindfulness and like really getting in touch with your body in that way and your breath in that way might not be for every person, and especially if you're practicing it in therapy with your therapist, like it might be a little awkward. And that's okay. There's many different coping skills, whether it be journaling, movement, and exercise, other grounding techniques, going for a walk, talking to a friend. And you can try out all of them and wait until you find one that works for you. You can go back to some. There's so much you can do.
I think it's all about putting in the effort, kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And like Lexi was saying, just try lots of different ones, things you maybe don't think will help or things you've never tried before. It's kind of just like having the courage to be brave, put yourself out there and try things that you've never tried before.
And like practicing them, because it's gonna be rough at first, and it's gonna feel kind of silly, but then after a while you kind of get the hang of it, and you can actually tell if it's gonna work or not work.
I think they also could be used like preventatively. So instead of waiting until you're kind of at your like skill breakdown point, it can be helpful to try and implement these things when you kind of notice your tells or your triggers, or when things are starting to maybe go downhill for you, so you can kind of nip things in the bud a little bit.
I think your mindset with them is really important too. Like if you tell yourself over and over, oh, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to help, well, how can we expect it to? You know, trying to do our best to keep an open mind, but also allowing ourselves to kind of trust the process in a way. You know, it might seem like, you know, we've talked about that they're really simple sometimes or silly, but it's kind of that trust the process, and like over time, like it may start to work better.
Totally. Like, I find that with things like journaling, sometimes my clients report and they tell me that, like, yeah, I tried it and it didn't really work. And then, like, they kind of keep doing it, and then they come back a few weeks later and they're like, oh, I've been loving journaling. It's been really helpful. And I'm like,
Well, and I think the fear sometimes gets us too, like the fear of it not working,
Yeah,
because
it gets
then
in the
you
way.
have, like, then it kind of feels like there's no other path. So then the fear of it failing or not doing well might get in the way of us actually.
Idea of when we talk about what's not working, because breaking that down, it's all relative on what works and what doesn't work. And typically what we see is people taking maybe a day or a week and trying something and saying it's not working, when we know that you need to put in the work and the effort to really invest in a coping skill or coping skills to really see progress and to see change over time.
It's not a one and done. Oh, I've coped. We're good now.
Check.
cross off the to-do list.
It gets easier after some time too.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me personally, like breathing, I was kind of thinking that it was stupid, that I would try it, and I was like, it really just doesn't work for me. But then I realized when I was in a true distressing situation that I did use deep breathing kind of naturally. Like I practiced it, and I think because I was maybe expecting it to be like a hard stop, like this makes me feel better, but then in a true distressing moment, it really did work, and it came more naturally, so it didn't feel as forced.
I think it's also important to know, like, we, as therapists, we're all human beings too, and whether we struggle with our own mental health stuff that we, you know, in the past 3 years and going through a global pandemic, that we've also been, you know, alongside all of our clients and the kids and teens that we work with, that we've gone through it with them. But we're human beings, so we utilize coping skills much in the same way that we teach our clients to utilize them as well. And I think that's important to know, that we're not just preaching it on them. These are tools that we use in our daily lives.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
We're going to talk in a little bit about the different coping skills that we really rely on and like and use. We also want to stress the importance that there's other work that goes on beyond that. So kind of the importance of therapy alongside of like the self-work that you can do.
Yeah, I think sometimes coping skills can be like band-aids that we temporarily put on a situation, but then we need to come back and think long-term, not short-term. And therapy is kind of what can help us think more long-term. Something like talking to a therapist regularly, attending to your problems regularly, stuff like that. So kind of making a pattern of taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Something I, kind of talked about before was that coping skills are really great for, being able to come back to your baseline and think through things. And I think that's where therapy comes into, is being able to process things, think through things, talk through things, because there are a lot of conversations that oftentimes still need to be had. We may be able to better recognize the situation and what's going on and work through it with our coping skills, but maybe we still need help in working through that situation, or just processing what happened, or at the end of the day, like, we still need to be heard.
Right, it's kind of like recentering. Recentering after, you've gone out of the office and you've been experiencing life and you're leaning on your coping skills and you're really reflecting and everything, and you report back and work with your therapist about, okay, where do we go from here? Kind of what Brooke was saying, what's working, what does that mean, what needs to be adjusted.
And that accountability partner to a point too, because then when you're in session and you can talk about a coping skill that you utilized and maybe you are feeling defeated and it's not working, then it is someone to give a different perspective and kind of check and balances. Make sure that we are practicing it. Maybe we can even practice it in session to see where the fault is coming from. But it's kind of that accountability partner and support.
You can try and like troubleshoot to see like
Yeah.
what's going on. Why is it maybe not being as effective as it possibly could be?
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
And maybe it is. Maybe you're just hard on yourself.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we
No,
said,
I love
like
that point.
maybe
Yeah.
things just aren't getting worse. Maybe they are doing their job for the time being.
Yeah. And having proper expectations about like what it looks like. Yeah. And like no one's supposed to go through all of this by themselves. Like you're not supposed to go through all of this by yourself. And so even though like we're going to talk about coping skills that we can practice at home, like you don't have to go through it by yourself. So that's why therapy is an important part of the process.
So now after talking about coping skills and why we need them a little bit, we're all going to go through and share what our favorite coping skills to use personally to teach our clients, what those kind of are and what those look like. I'm a clinician here at Therapyology. I specialize in working with teens and young adults on things like identity issues, mood stuff like depression, anxiety, all stuff like that. I'm trained in a form of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy, or as we call it, DBT. It's a skill-based therapy that really focuses on kind of what we're talking about today, like teaching clients how to use coping skills and different skills that can help them live a life worth living. So my favorite coping skill I want to talk about today is something called wise mind. Wise mind is basically just the inner wisdom that we all have in our mind, bodies, and souls. It might sound kind of cheesy and it might be something that you don't believe that you have, but I think that everybody does have a wise mind, whether you feel like you can access it easily or not. It might just be something that takes a little bit of practice. So when tapping into my wise mind, I like to do something called breathing in wise and breathing out mind. So I'll breathe in wise and breathe out mind. I feel like that's a great way to center yourself when you're dealing with kind of anxiousness, ruminating thoughts, overthinking, stuff like that. I will tap into that inner wisdom that knows everything is going to be okay and that I am fundamentally okay. It might just take some breathing in wise and some breathing out mind.
My name is Leah. I am also a clinician here at the practice. My specialties lie in working with both really young kids and adolescents. I focus on things like anxiety, ADHD, processing divorce, things like that. And I really like to use a lot of motivational interviewing, self-determination, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, to really empower people to kind of be the best version of themselves and to work through things on their own outside of therapy. The coping skill I would like to talk about is Cope Ahead. Cope Ahead is really great for emotion regulation. It involves a lot of reviewing and rehearsing. So there's a couple of different steps when it comes to Cope Ahead. The first one is analyzing the situation. So identifying the anxious situation and what exactly it is in that situation that's stressing you out or triggering you. It's also good to kind of check the facts in this situation, right? So am I anxious for like a good justifiable reason? Is for example, flying. Planes are big, they're scary, they're kind of foreign to us, we don't do it all the time. So that would be a reason that someone is anxious about flying. From there, you want to go ahead and picture yourself in this situation, right? So what does my anxiety look like? How does it kind of manifest itself in me? And then from there, you also want to picture yourself coping. So what do you like to do to cope? For me, I want to make sure I'm wearing a very comfortable outfit, something that's not restrictive. I want to make sure that I bring, an iPad or a tablet to download some movies so I can be distracted. I want to make sure I have noise-canceling headphones because that allows me to create some space in a situation where space isn't really accessible. So from there, you've identified what's making you anxious, you have pictured yourself in the situation, pictured yourself coping, and then you want to review and rehearse. So this way, when it comes time to actually use that skill in real time, it's like second nature. You have reviewed what the situation is. You have rehearsed yourself using these skills. So when you're in that situation, it's not a panic of, oh my gosh, what do I do? Your body kind of knows, like, all right, like these are my coping skills. I've reviewed this. This is what I'm going to do. And that is how we can use the coping skill Cope Ahead.
Hi, I'm Brooke Bendix, founder and clinical director of Therapyology. I specialize in working with tweens, teens, and young adults with a DBT focus. working with kids and teens with anxiety, depression, mood disorders, also with those who are struggling with gender identity issues, as well as divorce issues. I'm going to talk to you today on a coping skill that I personally use when I'm flying. So many years ago, I used to have an extreme anxiety and fear when it came to flying. So I would use a grounding technique to ground myself before and during flights when I started becoming really anxious with turbulence. I would be on a flight and sitting in a seat, and I could feel myself becoming more and more anxious. So what I would do in order to make myself feel a lot more calm and relaxed is I would close my eyes, I would put my hands on each of the armrests, and I would specifically think to myself, what can I feel? What can I sense? What can I smell? What can I'd say see, but my eyes are closed, so I'm only really seeing the blackness. And I would ground myself so that the anxiety would then dissipate and go away. And after many years of being on many different flights, my anxiety with traveling went from a 100 down to a 2 or a 3. So I utilized that in my practice, in my everyday life, or I'm not flying every single day, but when I am traveling, when I am flying, and it really helps me get back to equilibrium and to center. And that's something that we can practice when we are either traveling or in the car and feeling like we are getting very anxious during certain times. Grounding is a great way to really feel safe and secure and checking in with your senses and your sense of self.
I'm Olivia, and the coping skill that I'm going to talk about today are the more physiological coping skills like breathing and changing temperature. For me personally, I find that if I am feeling anxious, that my breath is really quick, and that is what kind of gets me into a cycle of feeling more anxious, and then I get really hot. So none of those feelings feel great if I'm already experiencing distressing emotion. So using things like a deep breathing technique like square breathing, or even changing my temperature by getting an ice pack and putting it on the back of my neck, or even physically stepping outside if it's nice and cool outside, those things can help regulate me so that I'm able to maybe cope a little bit better with the distressing emotion without feeling on top of it all of the physical symptoms that I'm feeling. The one that I mentioned, square breathing, really all you do for that is just draw a square with your breath in a pattern. So you breathe in for going up, you hold it, and then you breathe down, or you breathe out for down, and then you hold it again, usually in 4-second intervals. So that practicing it feels a little bit silly at times, but after a few practicings and then after some time using it in real situations, then you start to feel a little bit more comfortable, and it becomes kind of natural after a little bit.
Hi, I'm Lexi, a therapist here at Therapyology. I work mostly with teenage girls who are struggling with anxiety, perfectionism, friendship issues, relationship issues, self-esteem issues as well. I'm going to talk about today, my favorite coping skill is journaling and utilizing affirmations. So when I work with my clients, a lot of them talk about being stressed about tests that are coming up, feeling anxious about a social situation they're going to, and we kind of talk about the thoughts that are going on in their head. And usually it's something like, I'm going to fail this test, no one's going to like me, or things of that nature. And if you're going into a situation kind of being a mean person in your head, it's not going to go great probably. So we use affirmations to change the narrative in your head. So I practice them every morning, and I work with my clients to do this too, and write down things to switch the narrative. Saying things like, I work hard and I get good grades. My grades do not define me. I'm easy to be friends with. I have a lot to offer. I'm the author of my own life story. So that when you are at the test, or if you are in a social situation, instead of calling on, no one wants to be my friend, then you can call on the thought of, I'm easy to be friends with, I'm very well liked, I liked myself, things like that.
Well, that about sums it up for our Therapyology Thursdays. I hope everyone and got some valuable information on coping skills and learning to regulate and manage their anxiety and stressors, and took some of these coping skills that we've discussed and can utilize them and learn and use them in their real lives.
Awesome. So just make sure to like the video, follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok if it is still available once you watch this. But definitely follow us on all the platforms and stay tuned for more Therapyology Thursdays. And also let us know what you want to hear so that we know what topics to do next.
In the comments.